A shiver of fear ran down my back as I looked to the busy train platform outside my window. It's only your imagination, Cora. Silently, I counted to 30, watching businessmen shake hands before parting. A young husband tenderly bussed his wife on the cheek as she anxiously wound a handkerchief in her hands. A man caught my eye in passing. He smiled and tipped his hat in my direction, and I hurriedly glanced back to my lap. But when I lifted my eyes, the blue eyes of the dapper blonde gent inside the train car with me were locked on me again. He was clearly watching me over the top edge of his newspaper. I sighed and glanced at Nell beside me. "Cora?" she asked, studying my face. "What is it?" "That man 3 rows up," I whispered, careful not to look his way. "Don't look right away. Wait until I look back to the window, then see if he isn't studying us." "All right," she said, a bit wan. Our near escape from kidnappers in Paris had left us all on edge. Even now on this train bound for Provence, we had no idea if a telegram from our fathers demanding we purchase passage on a steamship bound for home would soon turn us right back around. I looked back to the platform. The train whistle blew, and those few remaining boarded or departed. Our car lurched and then slowly began rolling forward. A man came up outside my window, keeping pace with us. It took me a moment to realize who it was. "Pierre!" I whispered in sweet surprise, knowing he couldn't hear me. He smiled and tucked a red rose in the crevice just outside the window, then kissed his fingers and placed them against the glass. I smiled as Nell and Lil both giggled in excitement beside me, and Vivian shushed them. I put my fingers to the glass and stared into his green eyes, mouthing the word goodbye. He was practically running now and neared the end of the train platform. He mouthed the word adieu and stopped, lifting a hand. A wave of sorrow washed through me, surprising me as I craned my neck to see him as long as I could. I wouldn't see him for a while, and this was the first time we'd been apart since I met him. His gesture had been undeniably moving. I knew for a fact he'd had several appointments this morning. Whom had he ignored in order to see me off? "That might have been the most romantic thing I've ever seen," Lil said with a dreamy sigh, settling back in her seat once all we could see were city buildings and streets with countless people going about their days. "I would quite agree," said a man, suddenly at the edge of our row. All 4 of us looked up at him. The blonde man I thought had been watching me earlier. Will and Antonio rose behind him, concerned since he'd approached us without introduction. "That was Lord de Richelieu, wasn't it?" "It was," I said before I'd thought it through. "Do you know Pierre?" He gave me an odd smile. "Indeed. We have spoken on a number of occasions." Will and Antonio eased back a half-step with this revelation, but they did not leave. The man glanced over either shoulder at them, smiled again, and resettled his hat in the crook of his arm. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said to us all with a smart nod, and with that, he made his way down the aisle of the car, presumably heading toward the water closet. "I told you we should have arranged for a private car," Vivian grumbled toward Will. "And as I said," he returned benignly, "there were none to be had." His eyes followed the man. "Did you catch his name?" I shook my head. He didn't introduce himself, but if he knows Pierre, he can't be all bad, right? Will's eyes narrowed and flicked toward the window where the petals of my rose were fluttering in the gathering breeze. "I would imagine Lord de Richelieu knows a great number of people," he said, almost to himself, then looked down the empty aisle. "If we're to continue this journey," I said lowly, "we can't be looking over our shoulders the entire time, worried the kidnappers have returned." "And he hardly seems the type," Viv added, equally as quiet. She lifted a hand and waved toward the end of the train. so boldly approaching us. Quite, Will said, turning away then. But I could tell by the gingerly way he took his seat, as if poised to spring back up, that he didn't entirely agree.